All right, here we go. Aloha kako. I'm so blessed to be here today with Hema and our special guest here, Tatiana Young, Dr. Tatiana Young. I've had the honor and privilege to know Tati or Kalani. She's Kalani to me. For it seems like forever, but I think it's been like 4 or 5 years ish around there. And I remember the first time that I met Kalani. I think it was up at a HALE in Ka'ala, or I think actually was with Auntie Twinkle's then when we came and did our kahiao, reach out, and that was the first time that I got to meet this beautiful being who is such, aloha aina protector and is an amazing provider for our community and has fed so many people, not only with food, but with love and with acceptance and with understanding. And so, Kalani, mahalo nui for being here with us today. We actually just finished thatching some stuff on top of this little hale that we're building up here at Camp Palihua. So I'm always grateful for Kalani. So I'll turn the time over to you, Kalani.
Well, mahalo nui for Hema and Tiana for inviting me onto this Zoom cast. My Olelo Noeau is makahana ka'ike through doing one learns. And so I'm very much of the school of doing and just getting in there, and, feeding, doing whatever, using what get to make sure that our people are cared for in important and spiritual and nourishing ways. And so I'm here today to talk a little bit about my kuleana as a cultural anthropologist and as mahu who, went through the process of getting a PhD, which was not easy. And especially in a world, right now we're living in a moment of time where, people are really waking up to the kind of violence that oppressed and vulnerable communities are facing, especially with Black Lives Matter. So I just want to say that I want to start by saying actually that as a Kanaka scholar and as an activist, who's lived all over the world and in different parts of the United States, that one of my, entrances, you could say, into activism was working with human rights and the City Council in Thurston County and addressing issues of racism, transphobia, and homophobia at the time I was in high school. Wow. And so I started organizing and being an activist around, I started being activated around the age of 14 and in Olympia, Washington, actually. So I'm a diasporic Kanaka, so my parents are from Waianae, but my dad was in the military, so we moved to Washington State. So I had the experience of being a Kanaka who was going back and forth, in the diaspora and coming back home. So I was gonna say that, at 14, I started working with this Human Rights and Diversity Council in Thurston County. And that's when I came into consciousness about, issues of racism. And so throughout, my activist career, I've been involved in, direct actions, lead marches against violence, speaking out against bullying in schools and all of those sorts of things. And all of that was definitely shaped by, by those experiences of being oppressed myself. It says, okay. So, and I've also organized with Black Lives Matter in Seattle. So in 2013, that's when you started having, you know, this real, I mean, there's been a longer history of public outcry, right? Against systems of slavery, for example, and anti-Black racism and anti-Native racism. But in 2013, the Black Lives Matter movement started taking off. And so I happened to enter a PhD program in anthropology at the time, and worked with a number of activists in Seattle to organize and to support high school students that were actually organizing for Black Lives Matter in Seattle. And, you know, we did things like shut down the most busy intersection in Seattle and, you know, tried to call attention to issues of police brutality and racism by going through to the city council meetings and demanding justice for people who have been killed by the police because of racism. So anyway, for me, I don't separate my activism as a kanaka from larger issues of racism and police brutality and you know, institutional violence. So maka hana ka ike, you know, it's through doing one learns, yeah. And so it's kind of like, and no matter where I'm at, if there's oppression, I feel it's my kuleana to say something, to do something, you know what I mean? Use whatever privilege or tools that I have at my disposal to help.
I have a quick question, Kalani.
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
Yeah, as you're talking, like, I'm just listening, and, you know, I'm always filled when you speak and always amazed at the amount of things that you allow yourself to be a part of because you feel the need, you know, and you know that you can do something. In reflection or retrospect from these things that you've been speaking about, like makahana kaike, right? In doing, you learn, or in that hana is where that learning comes from. Like, what are some deep learnings you've had from those experiences, right? So like kind of looking at it now, like, and knowing that it's happened, what's some things that have really, like, maybe even been a shift in paradigm, or maybe, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Gosh, there's so many experiences. But I guess if I had to choose like a really transformative experience that I've been, you know, encountered in my life as an activist in particular, it would be working with a young Black trans teenager who was in juvenile detention. This is, you know, back when I was, I think, 18 at the time, but we started off so I worked for an organization called Stonewall Youth, which was an organization actually for LGBT youth. And I was a pen pal for a Black trans woman who was incarcerated. And so we wrote back and forth to each other for, you know, some months. And then when she got out of juvenile detention, I was able to save up enough money so that she could put a down payment on her apartment. And, you know, I didn't have that much money, but I felt like it was important for me to be of service to, you know, especially other trans women of color who maybe haven't had the kinds of privileges that I've been able to have, you know. And so I know that when there's injustice or there's some kind of inequity, we have to wield whatever kind of privilege we have to cop hold, to help. And, you know, I remember when she was able to secure a safe place for herself. Now, this was so long ago, I cannot even remember her name, but she probably remembers, you know. But, you know, it's that kind of, what was transformative for me was just hearing that she really appreciated that deep love from another trans woman, from another Mālama who you know, cared for her life, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that affirmation of life, and just her like conveying to me the appreciation, and then also like that we are in solidarity, you know what I mean? A Kanaka Mahu and a, you know, African American trans woman, both living under, you know, unequal systems of power in different ways, but, you know, really doing our best to kind of survive and thrive in a world that is built on our erasure. I think for me was a very transformative experience, and just knowing all the struggles that she had to go through as a Black trans woman, a young Black trans woman in this country. And that, I don't know, that's something that in a way pointed out my privileges, and you know what I mean? I was
It's 7 o'clock.
Yeah. So I was able to, you know, get a job and that sort of thing. She wasn't, you know, she had a really hard time just finding work. So it's like, so there was things that I could do to help out. And so I just think that's really important.
Mahalo. And that's, you know, something that I definitely know and feel from you, and I have from the beginning. You know, the compassion and the care, the, you know, like, if you can, you will. And it's not necessarily like, you're not thinking like, oh, if I get time or whatever, like if somebody needs help, you know what I mean, you find a way. And what a beautiful way to look at relationships, and, you know, to understand, like, even within friendships, that there is privileges that we have, you know, and how to utilize those privileges so that it can help the maximum amount of people, right? Like that's kind of what I'm hearing. Yeah. Wow. You know, this is every time I talk with this beautiful being, I'm always like, you know, Hema, you got any comments? Let me just push mute on our end.
Yes. So as you were speaking, Kalani, and you know, I'm looking back at Makahanaka Ike and all those times that, you know, you and I were on the Mauna, or you and T were on the Mauna, or I'm watching videos of you being there and in the HALE there, with all the kupuna, or, you know, all those different places that you were within this past year. It got me thinking about this Makahanaka Ike and being on the front lines. How can our viewers in the community, students, teachers, staff, how can they be of service to people on the front lines from where they are, if they're, I don't know, not too, you know, skilled or not willing and able to be there on the front lines? How can they help people in movements such as Black Lives Matter from home?
Good question. And I think it's very relevant because we're also living in a quarantine and we're living in a pandemic, right? So we live in very precarious times, and I think people are searching for meaning from their computer screens and from, you know, being at home. And I think there's lots of different ways that people can kako'o and help each other. Some of that is, you know, maybe contributing financially to, you know, Black Lives Matter, Black Trans Lives Matter. You know, you can kako'o by, you know, maybe dropping off food or, you know, resources to kupuna that live in your neighborhood, you know, anonymously, just kind of dropping it off there in their driveway or things like that. There's so many ways that people can kako'o people on the front lines. Another thing that people can do is vote. You can be politicized, right? You can write letters to your local political officials and let them know how you feel. And you can talk to your local representatives about, you know, defunding systems that don't work for the people. and maybe channeling some of those financial resources to communities that actually need it, and putting it in the hands of people who will actually allocate those resources in a way that can benefit the most amount of people. So I think that's really important. And also in terms of self-care, I think it's really important for people to kind of take stock of their own resources and personal resources and capacity, right? And have a very honest and serious conversation with their capacity to contribute, and I think in a lot of ways too, I think because we're under a quarantine, it's a great time for people to have reflection, to reflect upon, things that maybe they could have done differently, in terms of how they treat each other, how they treat, co-workers or family members. And maybe it's now a good time because we're in a moment of reflection. Maybe they can try to, change some of their behaviors so that, so that we're not as predatory with one another, but more affirming and uplifting and loving. So I think we're in a really critical time in terms of affirming that radical love, aloha, and the only way that we can really demonstrate that aloha is through makahana ke'ike, is through doing, is through practice. It's not just a matter of like having, it's not always about like being on camera and saying, oh, I'm doing these things, but actually, being of service in real time, in real ways. And a lot of those ways may not even be seen or counted. You know what I mean? So what are you doing off camera to kako'o, to help, to love, to affirm a better society, a better world? How are you worlding the change you want to see?
Mahalo nui, Kalani. I think that's some amazing advice. Thank you. Because sometimes, I also feel that way. Like, oh, how could I be, of more service, and how can I this stuff out? So mahalo nui for those beautiful ideas and very clear ways to kokua. I appreciate you. Thank you so much, Hema, for having us all on today, and for always doing everything you do, Hema. And Kalani, from the bottom of my heart, mahalo nui.
Yes, practice social distancing. It's actually physical distancing.
Yeah.
Social distancing, I feel like if we're any more socially distant in this society, it's just really unfortunate.
Yeah.
But I do think practicing physical distance is a thing.
Mahalo again for joining us on this Nanaike Kumu segment series. This is our volume 9. Mahalo Tati, mahalo team. And why don't you guys join us again next week for another episode of Nanaike Kumu. Aloha.
Aloha, mahalo.